Welcome back and thank you so much for staying with the team as we continue to reflect on today being Reconciliation Day in South Africa. So the question really afternoon is, have we reconciled as a nation, and what has the day really achieved 24 years since its inception? From our Durban studio now, we speak to Sizakele Shongwe. She is the Chief Director responsible for social cohesion at the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, and she joins us, as I said, from our studios in Durban. Good afternoon to you, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us here on the SABC News channel.
Good afternoon, Palisa, and good afternoon to the listeners.
Now, 24 years later, what has this Reconciliation Day achieved, more so in terms of healing the injustices of the past and perhaps creating that social cohesion that we're talking about?
Yes, the National Reconciliation Day is one of our national days. We have 6 national days, as you will know. And you will also know, perhaps by now it's already common knowledge, that the UNESCO has declared 2019 as the Year of Indigenous Languages. And so for Heritage Month, that's the theme that we ran with along our indigenous languages. And also for this year, for Reconciliation Day, we're continuing with the theme of languages, so that our theme for Reconciliation Day is actually the Year of Indigenous Languages, supporting national reconciliation through developing, promoting and preserving our indigenous languages. So we believe that to a certain extent, the languages that we use are going to help us to reconcile, especially at this time in South Africa when we are experiencing such high levels of violence generally, whether it's crime, whether it's violence between students, where we see children killing each other. That's another form of violence, but also specifically in relation to the gender-based violence that we have witnessed, especially in terms of femicide or intimate partner violence. So we can say that to a certain extent within this 24 years, there's a lot that we have achieved really, especially where government has made a special effort to promulgate some legislation and policy and strategy. So I think the responsibility of civil society then is to come in and to assist in ensuring that we're able to implement those legislations, those policies, those strategies, because that's where the people live, in communities. And when we're talking about reconciliation, particularly looking at the issues of languages, we know that language hinges on families and socialization. So we look at the issue of the socialization agents and to say that in the languages that we use in schools, in churches, in the community where we are, whether it's the boys or the girls, what are we saying in some institutions such as the police, in the media, what language are we using, and how does it reconcile us? How does it promote a unity, cohesiveness, and oneness and a connectedness? So to a certain extent, we have, perhaps not quite to the level that we would like to be reconciled, but I think it remains the responsibility of everybody to play their part in ensuring that we are reconciled and we healed as a nation.
Yeah, you talk about legislation and policies and a lot of concerns really from civil, the people in general, is that we've got beautiful policies on a piece of paper, but the implementation thereof is usually a challenge. But I want to move to the next question now. The Institute of Justice and Reconciliation last week released a barometer report in which the results sort of presented a mixed picture of how things are looking in South Africa. So the 2019 South African Reconciliation Barometer shows that a vast majority of South Africans do agree that South Africa still needs reconciliation, although only about a half report that they have experienced reconciliation or believe that South Africa has made progress with reconciliation.
Yes, I'm aware of the study that was launched on the 12th of December. Actually, it was the same day that we were having our pre-National Day dialogue. And I think the statistic that's actually reflected is about 77 people in South Africa believe that we're not yet reconciled. But as I have already said as well, it's a huge number. But I think it's almost like 2/3 of people that don't believe that we have, but there is a third that is actually quite optimistic. And I think we should build on that sector that is quite optimistic on reconciling, but also just to strengthen the efforts that we are doing to make sure that people are reconciled with our signs and our symbols, through the national anthem, through the national flag, through the other symbols that perhaps we never particularly highlight. but also through reinventing our value system. I think there's a lot that we can do around our value system, which is why as the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, we support the program of moral regeneration movement, because I think we need to reinvent our value system so that people get to understand and to value life and to value and respect people from different backgrounds, whether it's women, it's children, people with albinism, people with disabilities, the LGBTQI plus community. So I think that there's a lot of room for improvement in the efforts that we're making, and surely, as we had started and with the President's speech today, there's a lot that we still need to do around the issues of land, around the issues of basic services, because I think those are some of the issues that cause conflict, and then also around the issues of race and racism, but also maybe to move beyond that, to look at issues around the environment, because I think we're interlinked in all the things that we have around us. So whether we're looking at water, agriculture, livestock and so forth, that is all aspects that we need to consider to see how we can address them to ensure that we are properly reconciled.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you are quite familiar with the report that I'm referring to, because part of what it also talks about is the processes really, such as creating unity and bringing about that reconciliation. They say that it requires that a society must also understand and remember its divided past in order to create that different future. So we really still need to reflect on the injustices of the past, so to remember where we come from as a country.
Exactly. I think we need to be firm and to be bold and take a stand and not hesitate to go to the uncomfortable spaces, whether we're talking about xenophobia or we're talking about racism or we're talking about disability or we're talking about land redistribution or distribution. Those are the areas that we should be able to go to, because some of the things I think that cause disunity are issues around trust. There's a lot of trust issues. So I think that's one of the things that we need to work on, and to understand that when we're talking about trust, what are we talking about? Is it integrity, honesty? What other values are involved? Which is why I keep emphasizing on the issue of going back to the values. Yeah. I remember that when we won the Rugby World Cup and the third time around, we kept saying again that we're united. That sports really brings us together, and it really does bring us together, South Africans. So does music and a few other festivities. But I think we need to go beyond that to look at the fact that when the rugby is gone, what remains? When netball is gone, what remains? When that festival is gone, what remains? What can I sit with a person with a disability or a white person or an Indian person that still makes me identify with them as a South African? So what is it that identifies as a South Africa? So we're also talking about issues of identity. Yes. So those are some of the uncomfortable places that we need to go to, issues around identity.
And you touch on the Springbok victory. A lot of people were saying that, listen, this is the same excitement and feel that we felt in 1995, and we were hopeful that things would have changed for the better. But thereafter, it looks like things went back to where they were. A lot of people were just not impressed with that, because people were saying that this particular victory will bring that social cohesion that we've been talking about.
I think we choose to be optimistic about it. I think that was a moment that we really needed as a country, because we're in a particular space. I mean, we saw how when you have a common goal, you can achieve, and when you have focus, you can achieve. So we're able to see issues of connectedness, issues of unity, issues of oneness. And I think rather than looking at the negative aspect of it, is to rather build onto that, to say that with this element of unity that I have seen and witnessed during this victory, how do I take it forward, and how do I share it within my family, within my community, within my work situation? Because I think it's something that we need to get to practice and to move beyond the jargon and the slogans that we really talk about, because everybody talks social cohesion, nation building, but we don't really go deep down to say that what really glues us together, what is the gel that puts us together. But again, I just want to reiterate that in the victory that we recently had, there are a lot of lessons to be learned. And I think as a country, as South Africa, we need to be able to sustain our efforts. Maybe that's one of the challenges, that it's that and then it's gone and then we're on to something else and then it's gone at something else. It would be very useful for us to be able to sustain the efforts. So perhaps to even have sustainable strategies around that. Those are some of the things that we need to concentrate on, so that 5 years from now we're going to be able to say this is where we come from, this is what we have done, and this is how we have sustained it.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Sizakele Shongwe is the Chief Director responsible for social cohesion from the Department of Arts and Culture, joining us now live from our studios in Durban.